Chair may declare a recess at any time. Also, for today's hearing, Chairman Comer and Ranking Member Connolly will each be recognized for 1 minute after me and the Ranking Member provide our opening statements. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Good morning. Today, we begin the first hearing on the Oversight Subcommittee on DOGE. This committee will be laser focused on bringing full transparency to waste, fraud, and abuse within the federal government and presenting the plans to fix the tremendous problems we expose. We as a country are $36 trillion in debt. That is such a stunning amount of money. It's absolutely staggering to even comprehend how we as a people, we as a country, found ourselves here. This is not a Democrat problem. This is not a Republican problem. This is an American problem. To make it clear for everyone, not only are we $36 trillion in debt, but the compounding interest on our debt is also growing out of control. Even if we decided to defund the entire federal government, we cannot escape our debt and the compounding interest owed on our debt, which grows bigger and bigger every year. In 2025, interest payments are projected to be $952 billion, which is more than our entire military budget. In 2026, it will be $1 trillion. And by 2035, $1.8 trillion. Over the next decade, total interest payments are projected to be $13.8 trillion. These interest payments don't serve a single American. They don't build a bridge, a road, provide disaster relief, or fund a single part of the behemoth that is the federal government. These interest payments pay our masters who own our debt, and the American people are in debt slavery to everyone who owns our debt. Our crippling national debt and massively growing interest on our debt will destroy us. Not destroy one political party or the other, it will destroy all of us together. It drives inflation, making life unaffordable for Americans struggling to financially survive. It is crippling small businesses struggling to be successful. Our massively growing debt and interest are the chains and shackles harnessed to every American and their children and every generation to come. But first, let us be brutally honest about how this massive debt came to be in the first place. It came from Congress and from elected presidential administrations. And I believe enslaving our nation in debt is one of the biggest betrayals against the American people by its own elected government. The American people's anger over this betrayal hard-earned tax dollars, their literal blood, sweat, and tears. And taxes are collected by law at gunpoint. Don't pay your taxes and you go to jail. The federal government does not have to provide excellent customer service to earn its income. It takes your money whether you like it or not. And federal employees receive their paycheck no matter what. Whether veterans receive their benefits or not, whether your mail shows up or not, and whether your tax dollars are used to help Americans in need or are sent to foreign countries, for foreign people, for foreign causes. No matter how bad the federal government fails the American people, it still takes your money. It still pays its own federal employees, and it never, ever goes out of business. There are no consequences for bad customer service, total failure, and for enslaving the American people against their will in the ever-growing and future all-consuming national debt. Congress has a dismal approval rating that ranges between 12 and 20%. I don't blame the American people one bit for their sentiment and disgust. The American people will be watching this committee and how we tackle one of the biggest problems of our time. While we are a committee made up of the opposite far-reaching corners of Congress, we were each elected to serve and represent the American people and how their hard-earned tax dollars are spent. We as Republicans and Democrats can still hold tightly to our beliefs, but we are going to have to let go of funding them in order to save our sinking ship. This is not a time for political theater and partisan attacks. The American people are watching. The legislative branch can't sit on the sidelines. In this subcommittee, we will fight the war on waste shoulder to shoulder with President Trump, Elon Musk, and the DOGE team. This week, we turn our attention to improper payments by the federal government, including in Medicaid and Medicare. I'm looking forward to what we find out and how to solve this crisis. I now yield to the ranking member, Ms. Stansbury, for her opening statement.
Weeds controlled.
Visit weedman.com for a free quote.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. I first ditched big wireless and started using Mint Mobile way back in 2019.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to the very first subcommittee on government efficiency. As was said, this committee is tasked under the Oversight Committee with ensuring that the government and the vital services that it provides, from healthcare to national security, actually work for the American people. And this is certainly a topic that we have worked on for many, many years here in the Oversight Committee, in which I personally have worked on as a former civil servant who worked at the Office of Management and Budget. And in fact, for anyone who has ever worked on these issues, you know that there is ample ground for bipartisan work to make the government work better for the American people and to ensure that it operates in a more efficient manner. And in fact, all of us here on the Democratic side are ready to roll up our sleeves and to get to work. And just last week, I had the opportunity to sit down with the chairwoman and to discuss these very issues and opportunities to work across the aisle. And like the chairwoman who shared some of her background with me, I grew up in a working family. I grew up working for small mom and pop family businesses and understand the necessity of balancing the books, making sure we can deliver, and fiscal responsibility. And that's why today's hearing is focused on making sure that the federal government is doing what it's supposed to and digging into the more than $236 billion in improper payments that we see going out the door every single year. And we need to get to the bottom of that. And we need to make sure that we're putting into place rigorous oversight and controls to prevent fraud and abuse, and of course, to go after bad actors. And that is why myself and the Oversight Ranking Member Connolly and other Democratic members of the committee sent a set of bipartisan ideas that we'd like to work on together that would root out waste, fraud, and abuse and modernize and streamline how our agencies deliver vital programs for the American people. These are programs that are important for our seniors and our families and healthcare and the education system. And we need bipartisan solutions to get across the finish line. And we've been trying over the last several years to get these ideas out of this committee, but unfortunately, the committee's priorities have been elsewhere under the current majority. So I hope we can fix that this Congress. But we can't just sit here today and pretend like everything is normal and that this is just another hearing on government efficiency. I mean, all you have to do is look across this room and see that it is not a normal hearing. Because while we're sitting here, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are recklessly and illegally dismantling the federal government, shuttering federal agencies, firing federal workers, withholding funds vital to the safety and well-being of our communities, and hacking our sensitive data systems. In fact, while we were here discussing government waste on the House floor yesterday, Elon Musk was standing behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office with the president, and the administration was making emergency court appeals to try to unlock his team's access to the Treasury payment system, which they claim they are using to study improper payments, which is the topic of this hearing. But here's the thing. The Treasury payment system, which includes Social Security information and bank accounts for millions of Americans and data that's critical to national security and the operation of the US government, and payments that go out the door annually equal to almost a fifth of the US economy, is not where the payment decisions are made, because that happens inside the agencies that are currently being dismantled. And the people who actually investigate waste, fraud, and abuse at these agencies are the inspector generals, who Donald Trump fired his first week in office in a midnight massacre. So we have to ask ourselves, what is really going on here? Why did Republicans block Elon Musk from appearing before this very committee last week? Why is the administration so eager to allow Elon Musk and his hackers to have access to proprietary and private information in the Treasury payment systems? Why are our colleagues across the aisle shielding them as they are clearly breaking the law? And why is the vice president trying to rewrite the US Constitution by tweet and undermine the judiciary? So obviously, we're in the Oversight Committee and we have a lot of questions, and so do the American people, especially while our colleagues across the aisle are trying to scoop up the savings from the dismantling of these agencies to pay for the largest permanent tax break in American history for billionaires and the folks that they're helping on their side of the aisle. So let me close by saying this directly to Mr. Elon Musk. We are well aware that you are eager to engage with members of Congress on social media, but we're not here to play. If you have serious desire to engage in democracy and transparency, we welcome you to the Oversight Committee. Come and testify in front of the American people under oath, because we want to know what you're up to. So if you're interested in talking to us, then please join us here in the People's House in the House of Representatives. And with that, I yield back.
My whole career, I was pretty much bald, so people just got to know me as being a bald guy. I did wonder what it would be like if I could have hair.
The gentlelady yields. President Trump signed an executive order on his first day in office called Establishing and Implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency. The EO simply renamed an office in the White House that was actually established by President Obama in 2014 called the U.S. Digital Service. President Trump can have Elon Musk into his Oval Office anytime he likes. I now recognize the chairman of the Oversight Committee, Chairman James Comer.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman Green, for holding today's hearing to launch a war on waste. President Trump won an electoral landslide with a clear mandate from the American people to eliminate Washington waste and stop the theft of American tax dollars. And he is delivering on his promise. President Trump has empowered Elon Musk and DOGE to conduct a government-wide audit to identify solutions to curb waste and protect tax dollars. That's exactly what the mission of this committee is supposed to be. And I'm glad that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have found a newfound interest in waste, fraud, and abuse. With a staggering $37 trillion in national debt, we have no time to lose. A key place to start is improper payments. Since 2003, the government has lost $2.7 trillion because of improper payments. Fraudsters, organized criminals, hostile foreign actors, and even government employees have siphoned money away from those who truly qualify for assistance. For years, Republicans and Democrats in the Oversight Committee have condemned this waste. But now that DOGE is taking real action, Democrats are choosing to defend the bureaucracy and status quo instead of standing up for the American people. I want to thank Chairwoman Green for holding this very important hearing, not only to expose the problems, but to find solutions. We stand with President Trump and DOGE in the fight to end waste, fraud, and abuse in Washington. With that, I yield back to Subcommittee Chairwoman Green, and congratulations again, Chairwoman, on holding this first hearing of the DOGE Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the ranking member on oversight, Mr. Connolly.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for having this first hearing on DOGE. Improper payments is not a new subject. I remember joining Steve Lynch and then Todd Platts, Republican member from Pennsylvania, in my freshman year, talking about improper payments. At that time, improper payments were in the range of $35 billion a year. They're now in the range of $280 billion a year, and times 10, we could cut almost $3 trillion from the debt if we addressed improper payments in a deliberative way, which GAO has called for in the high-risk category for years. We can also, secondly, enforce the tax code. It's estimated that at least $500 billion a year is left on the table uncollected but owed because of lack of resources in the IRS. Again, times 10 is $5 trillion over a decade. And finally, we can modernize federal IT systems, which we've championed for years on this committee. We know that legacy systems alone could save hundreds of millions of dollars a year in operating and maintenance costs. So if we want to be serious about it, let's be serious about it. But the way not to do it is to fire the people charged with the remit of waste, fraud, and abuse, namely inspectors general. President Trump has already now fired 19, including most recently the USAID Inspector General, who dared to warn that we could lose $500 million of food aid because it's in warehouses not being moved because of the funding freeze that was imposed in AID. That's a cost we need to avoid. And for doing his job, that IG was fired. If we want to be serious, we've got to have objective, neutral inspectors general who are monitoring government waste, fraud, and abuse and expenditures. And I think you would find Democrats more than willing partners in that kind of enterprise if we're going to be serious. But a wrecking crew, a wrecking crane, a wrecking ball is not going to do it. And we're not going to support that approach to waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields. The President of the United States has the prerogative to fire anyone that has overseen $36 trillion in debt, enslaving the American people, and rightfully so. I'm pleased to welcome today's expert panel of witnesses who each bring unique experience and expertise that will be valuable to today's discussion. I'd first like to welcome Mr. Haywood Talcove, the Chief Executive Officer for Government at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, Inc. His commitment to customers' needs allows LexisNexis to develop market-leading solutions that have enabled customers to stop fraud, waste, and abuse. Next, we have Mr. Stuart Whitson, the Senior Director of Federal Affairs at the Foundation of Government Accountability. Stuart was previously a special agent in the FBI, a U.S. Army veteran, and now spends his time at FGA advocating to improve welfare, the workforce, and other policy. Next, we have Ms. Dawn Royal, a certified welfare fraud investigator in the state of Wyoming and director for the United Council of Welfare Fraud. She advocates for investigating and preventing fraud of government benefits and has done so over the past 16 years. Finally, we have Mr. Dylan Hetler-Goddett, the Director of Government Affairs at the Project on Government Oversight. Dylan leads advocacy efforts and policy reforms to a wide range of good governance. I thank each of our witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to your testimony. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand.
I know this is hard to hear, but it's important. The shooter who murdered my beautiful butterfly Dylan carried a highly lethal weapon into Sandy Hook Elementary. In approximately 4 minutes, he shot 154 bullets, killing 20 children and 6 educators. 5 of those bullets hit Dylan, and in an instant, my little boy was gone. And too many other families are suffering the same anguish as mine. Firearms are the leading cause of death for America's children. A lack of comprehensive school shooting prevention laws are putting our nation's children in danger of similar attacks. Every day in the U.S., 12 children die from gun violence. Many of them are shot in places where they should be safest, like their classrooms and school playgrounds. It's long past time for Congress to take action to stop these tragedies. So please sign our petition now to ramp up the pressure on Congress to finally take action to stop school shootings before more lives.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you. You may take a seat. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statement and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statement to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I now recognize Mr. Talcove for his opening statement.
Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansberry, and distinguished members of the committee. For over a decade, a silent war has been waged against American taxpayers, not with bombs or guns, but with data and technology. Outdated government systems permit criminals to access unlimited sums of money. During the pandemic, they stole $1 trillion. 70% of those dollars went overseas. Shockingly, it's just not criminals exploiting the system, it's the flawed system itself acting as the accomplice. If left unchecked, the U.S. government will continue to lead the world in funding cyber criminals. This is a data and technology problem, and it demands a data-driven response. Criminal syndicates have turned benefit programs into their personal ATM machines, exploiting those in need who wait months for benefits that may never come. These ruthless crooks use our money to fund child trafficking, disperse drugs in our communities, and terrorism. For years, criminal networks have stolen personal information from the public and private sector. They exploit real identities to manipulate antiquated government systems, siphoning off billions in taxpayers' hard-earned money. We continue to pay benefits to deceased and incarcerated individuals, direct money to bad actors flagged on the do not pay list, and overlook duplicate Social Security numbers by not following best practices. During the pandemic, a simple cross-check of PPP loan recipients against IRS records would have exposed massive fraud and prevented payments to transnational criminals who sold their quote-unquote sauce on the dark web. To stop this, we must reclaim control of our systems, not just from the criminal syndicates, but the flawed systems enabling them. Smarter technology, data, and identity verification are not optional. They are necessities to protect taxpayers and ensure aid reaches those who truly need it. Now, the use of AI is fundamentally changing society, but in the hands of criminals, it has become a weapon. Lawbreakers are now using it to supercharge their war on taxpayers. They use AI to create fake identity documents that pass biometric verifications. Bots flood portals with thousands of fraudulent claims per second, and deep fakes that mimic real applicants bypass the outdated NIST 863 standards from 2017. Honest and deserving people seeking access to government benefits suffer through endless application forms that are nearly impossible to navigate. But criminals from Russia, China, and Romania gain access with ease. The private sector has fraud rates below 3%. Meanwhile, the public sector operates at a 20% fraud rate. The solution is clear. It's already used every day to protect consumers. You seamlessly interact with your bank through an app that verifies your identity in milliseconds. There's no excuse for the government to lag if we do the following. Number one, implement identity verification on the front end. Criminals should never receive a dime. Eliminate self-certification. No more honor system for billion-dollar programs. And continuous auditing. Keep verifying because criminals never stop adapting. Pay and chase does not work. Of the $250 billion stolen in pandemic unemployment fraud, less than $5 billion has been recovered. The idea in government that you cannot have speed and security is fiction. I urge Congress to consider making the following legislative changes. Number one, update the 1974 Privacy Act to allow for data sharing and matching. Number two, fund a budget for fraud prevention in each appropriation bill. The USDA spends 1/20th of 1% on fraud prevention. Mandate that individuals caught stealing from entitlement programs pay hefty fines and are removed from the program permanently. And finally, eliminate broad-based categorical eligibility. This committee has a choice: continue losing this war against criminal cartels and nation states, or fight back and save $1 trillion annually. Fraud prevention is not benefit prevention. It's the key to ensuring that every dollar reaches those who truly need it. Hardworking Americans rely on these programs not just to survive, but to build better lives for their families. When criminals exploit the system, they just don't steal money, they steal opportunities. Stopping fraud isn't about denying benefits, it's about protecting them. This crime has two victims. The first are the taxpayers, and the second are those seeking benefits. The fraudsters, cartels, and criminal syndicates are watching this hearing, I'm sure of it. It's time to show them that America will not fund its own destruction. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Hey, Robert Herjavec from Shark Tank. I'm a huge fan. Hey, what is your number one tip for saving money?
Easy. Pay off your credit card debt as soon as possible. And there's actually a way to do that without paying the full amount.
What if I can't afford to pay more every month?
You actually don't have to pay more. In fact, your monthly payments go down, and they can go down as much as 40%.
So monthly payments go down, total debt goes down, and I can be out of debt that fast. So what do I need to do?
Thousands of people have done this. It's insane how well it works. Have you seen the video I've made? It explains everything. My name's Robert Herjavec, and you probably know me from the hit show Shark Tank, where my job is to help people grow their small business. But this video is about helping people do something even more important: get out of debt. It's called the Debt Clear USA program, and it is amazing. The Debt Clear USA program uses a team of top negotiators. Here's how it works. The Debt Clear USA team discovered that by working with people with $7,500 or more in debt, they could negotiate much better deals by cutting through the red tape and talking directly with these banks to get people the savings they deserve. Currently, the Debt Clear USA team is achieving an average of 45% aggregate discount on debts. Imagine that. 45% of your total debt erased, and some are higher, as high as 50% off. That's right, up to half of your debt vanishing just through this negotiating team. Not only that, the Debt Clear USA program actually lowers your monthly payment, and here's the best part: no more interest. That's right, the interest stops completely. This team has over 10 years of experience negotiating with every bank and loan company you can imagine. They've helped over 300,000 people get out of debt. They have a 4.9 star rating on Trustpilot on over 15,000 reviews, and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, which is really important to me. So if you want to see if you qualify and have the Debt Clear USA negotiators fight for you, just click the Learn More button below and we'll get started. Next, you'll answer a few questions with your name, how much debt you have, and a phone number that your Debt Clear USA
Thank you, Mr. Talcove. I now recognize Ms. Royal for her opening statement.
Good morning, Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansberry, and committee members. My name is Dawn Royal. I'm a certified welfare fraud investigator, two-term past president, and a current director of the United Council on Welfare Fraud. The United Council on Welfare Fraud is a national professional organization dedicated to protecting the integrity in our nation's public assistance programs. We are the only national organization singularly focused on the detection, prevention, and prosecution of welfare fraud. For too long, agency bureaucrats have pitted citizens' access to welfare programs against the integrity of those programs. Access versus integrity should never be an either-or dichotomy. We can all agree that access to public assistance is crucial. America's citizens should not be hungry or deprived of medical care because of their inability to pay. However, making sure vulnerable citizens have access to these welfare programs should not mean that we simply turn a blind eye to integrity. We do not pursue the prevention, detection, and prosecution of if we do not pursue the prevention, detection, and prosecution of fraud, taxpayers become the victims as the welfare programs become slush funds for anyone wanting to supplement their income with SNAP benefits, absolve themselves from the financial responsibility of medical bills, and using Medicaid to further taxpayer exploitation by taking advantage of cash assistance, energy assistance, childcare, and other social welfare programs. One example of a welfare fraud is a case that I investigated that was criminally prosecuted last year. The applicant mother failed to disclose her children's father as well as his employment and income on multiple applications she submitted for Medicaid, SNAP, and low-income energy assistance. The co-defendant father worked a steady job, earning a six-figure salary, and provided an enviable lifestyle for his family, including vacations, luxury vehicles, snowmobiles, motorhomes, lavish gifts, including one from the wife to the husband, which was a $1,200 bottle of bourbon. Evidence we presented at trial included a candidate registration forms filed by the defendant father when he ran for town council and later mayor of the town where he declared he lived at the same address provided by his wife on her public assistance programs. This was a case of greed, but it emphasizes how easy it was for these criminals to make false statements on applications in order to receive benefits from multiple programs that they were never eligible for. I could spend the rest of my day providing countless examples of how taxpayer-funded programs are exploited, and the message would be the same. Investigators continue to be hamstrung by antiquated regulations, conflicting directives from federal agencies, and the lack of access to technology. Sadly, investigators have also found themselves at odds with the career bureaucrats who recite watered-down facts about fraud in order to promote their political agendas. Specifically, we can look to the career bureaucrats who have historically claimed that the fraud rate in SNAP is less than 1%. The disregard for the value of integrity is evidenced by the less than 1/20th of 1% of the SNAP budget spent on the prevention, detection, and prosecution of fraud. As part of Medicaid unwinding debacle, the bureaucrats specifically directed states that they, and I quote, cannot recover or recoup the cost of services from a beneficiary, even if they have been found after an administrative hearing or criminal proceeding to have committed Medicaid beneficiary fraud or abuse, end quote. Sadly, it is already apparent that career bureaucrats are not being totally transparent as they attempt to protect spending and broken programs. We fail to understand how mitigating the rampant fraud in Medicaid, SNAP, and other welfare programs stands up or strengthens the welfare programs. Fact is, the opposite is true. Ignoring fraud and gaslighting fraud statistics erodes the very foundations of the programs that are essential to their future viability. There are things this committee can do to help the investigators fighting the war on fraud. Number one, eliminate self-attestation in the application process for all programs. Number two, funding for technology that includes identity verification tools that will help prevent fraud. The current pay and chase model is not sustainable. Number three, immediately implement the National Accuracy Clearinghouse, the NAC, that will provide data to states to prevent duplicate participation in all of the social welfare programs. And four, allocate direct funding with mandates restricting the use of the funding to the prevention, detection, and prosecution of fraud. In closing, we're at a crossroads. Those of us who have firsthand knowledge of the degree in which public welfare programs are being attacked know that reform is absolutely necessary. Reform to the recipient application process, the billing process in Medicaid, and how SNAP benefits are processed, and how providers and retailers are authorized. We thank you for the opportunity for UCOF to participate in this hearing. We feel that the investigators who are on the front lines fighting the daily battle against the war on fraud need to be at the table and participating in the development of action plans that will make a difference in protecting the programs and defending the taxpayers.
First-rate fertilization.
Visit weedman.com for a free quote.
Once you try a comfort hoodie, you can't go back to regular hoodies. They're slightly weighted, super oversized. It's that perfect fit that makes you feel like you're wrapped in a blanket, but you get to look like you have your life together at the same exact time. And when I tell you, they have every color you could think of, from neutrals, vibrant colors. They have zip-ups, you guys, if that's more your vibe. They even have dog hoodies that you can match with your dogs. They have the sweatpants with the cuffs, but also the sweatpants with the wide leg. Just look at how much higher quality and thicker these are than your average sweatpant. I also love that this brand supports mental health. If you try one on, you will literally never want to take it off. It will be your road trip hoodie, your airport hoodie, your bonfire hoodie, your coffee shop hoodie, I'm telling you. And a moment for this hood, like, it's so big and flattering. The inside feels like heaven on your skin. The waistbands are so thick and stretchy without any hard wiring in here, so they're never digging into your stomach. If you don't like the ones with the logo on it, don't worry. They have the standard collection that has no logos. These things have blown up on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. Like, I see a comfort hoodie every time I leave my house. Even the big celebs are wearing them right now, which is why they're always sold out. So if you want to make sure you get your size, I would not wait. I am 5'2", and I'm wearing a medium in this hoodie, and then I'm wearing a small in these sweatpants.
Thank you, Ms. Royal. I now recognize Mr. Whitson for his opening statement.
Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansbury, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. On the campaign trail, President Trump promised to take on the bloated bureaucracy in D.C., rebuild trust in the DOJ and the FBI, crack down on waste, fraud, and abuse, and restore common sense. And on day one, he started delivering on those promises with a wave of executive orders and the official launch of DOGE, which he, of course, tasked Elon Musk to lead. Already, DOGE efforts have brought to the public's attention countless examples of wasteful spending, including $59 million paid to luxury hotels in New York to house illegal immigrants, $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. The list goes on. But rather than applauding the work of DOGE, the left has launched a coordinated campaign to try to demonize Mr. Musk with the hope of shifting focus away from the disastrous waste, fraud, and abuse that occurred on Biden's watch. But guess what? It's not working. Because no matter what political party people hail from, the vast majority of Americans agree that $10 million worth of food funneled to Al-Qaeda was probably not the best use of taxpayer money. But there's another source, a key source of wasteful spending that DOGE and the subcommittee should set their sights on next, and that's Medicaid waste and fraud. While initially meant as a program for the truly needy, Medicaid is bloated into a massive welfare program for millions of able-bodied adults lured into the trap of government dependency. And as Medicaid has grown, so too has mismanagement. Today, more than $1 in $5 spent on Medicaid is improper. In Medicaid alone, fraud and mismanagement is on track to cost U.S. taxpayers, get this, more than $1 trillion over the next 10 years. When it comes to the problem of improper payments, the Medicaid program is the biggest culprit, encompassing nearly 1/3 of all federal improper payments. And more than 80% of Medicaid improper payments are due to one thing: eligibility errors. If Congress wants to help President Trump address wasteful spending, then targeting eligibility errors in Medicaid should be one of your top priorities. Bottom line, to address this challenge, Congress can take 3 decisive actions. So first, Congress can strengthen the Medicaid program through legislative action. That would include repealing Biden's disastrous Medicaid streamlining rule, which ties the hands of states trying to remove ineligible enrollees. You can and should do this through reconciliation, and it will produce $164 billion in savings if you do. You can also strengthen verification requirements to ensure only eligible individuals receive benefits and ensure a nationwide NAC is implemented without delay. Second thing Congress can do is help President Trump's DOGE effort by ensuring that entrenched partisan bureaucrats don't stand in the way of reform. So Musk and his DOGE team have already found hundreds of billions of dollars funneled into wasteful, fraudulent, and flat out insane projects. But they've only scratched the surface. If this much fraud has been exposed in just a few weeks, imagine what else is buried under layers of red tape and government excuses. But guess what? All of these insane projects have one thing in common. They were all approved and funded by unelected bureaucrats. And these and other entrenched bureaucrats are already pledging to fight against President Trump's efforts to improve government accountability and efficiency. Personnel is policy. And without competent staff to faithfully execute the president's agenda, the DOGE project will fail. And this is where Congress can help. Congress can support the president in carrying out his DOGE effort by making all executive branch employees at will, codifying the president's authority to fire unproductive or insubordinate agency employees as needed. At the same time, Congress can grant the president authority to permanently eliminate vacant positions and consolidate non-essential positions across agencies and departments to help promote efficiency and put the right people in the right seat. The third thing, Congress can make President Trump's DOGE cost-cutting and deregulatory reforms permanent by passing the REINS Act. And so there's only one big problem with the DOGE effort. Most of its work can be undone by a future president with the stroke of a pen. To make President Trump's DOGE reforms permanent, Congress must act. And the best way to do this is to pass the REINS Act. This would return Article 1 budgetary power of the purse to Congress while promoting deregulation. It would also help lock in the DOGE reforms and cement President Trump's legacy as the most consequential deregulatory and cost-cutting president in U.S. history. The American people are watching. It's time for Congress to act. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
This 7-second trick helped me at the age of 62 eliminate type 2 and toss out my insulin. If I were to die tomorrow, I would want...
Thank you, Mr. Whitson. I now recognize Mr. Hetler-Godet for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Green, Ranking Member Stansberry, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Dylan Hetler-Godet, and I am the Director of Government Affairs at the Project on Government Oversight, or POGO. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today to talk about the critical issue of bringing more accountability and transparency to federal spending, including rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Since our founding in 1981, POGO has been focused on promoting more accountability and rooting out wasteful spending and promoting efficiency, especially at the Department of Defense. We have a long and well-established track record on these issues, and we take a back when it comes to promoting a better and more effective government, which necessarily includes a federal government that is a good and responsible steward of taxpayer dollars. Let's take a moment to pause here to talk a little bit about terms that we're going to hear a lot today and the difference between them. Waste is different from fraud. Fraud is different from abuse, and abuse is different from both. When we talk about improper payments, they are a subset of those other three categories. But that doesn't tell us the whole picture either. Sometimes improper payments are a function of bad record keeping. Sometimes they are a function of outdated information technology systems. Sometimes they come about through human error, and sometimes they come about through negligence. There are a variety of reasons why improper payments happen. It just simply is not the case that improper payments are only a function of bad people doing bad things with bad intent. That doesn't mean we shouldn't focus on trying to mitigate improper payments, and that certainly doesn't mean that the American people should not be concerned with how their tax dollars are used. The good news is that there are some time-tested solutions and tools to help mitigate these problems. For example, when we think about the independence of inspectors general, we're talking about a resource that is extraordinarily valuable to the American people. In fiscal year 2023 alone, inspectors general identified over $93 billion worth of potential savings to taxpayers. Whistleblowers are also an incredible resource to the American taxpayer. Through the IRS's whistleblower program alone, billions of dollars have been recouped from tax cheats since the inception of that program in 2007. Whistleblowers have also played an instrumental role in helping the Department of Justice pursue False Claims Act cases that have resulted in billions of dollars in reclaims settlement costs. It seemed to me that if an administration were serious about wanting to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, they would support and resource whistleblowers and inspectors general. They would not demonize them, and they would certainly not fire them en masse in an unlawful midnight purge. There are other reforms we can think about too, reforms that are more technical, but just as important. Key statutes such as the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, the Data Act, and critical platforms like usaspending.gov were really important improvements and innovations when they came about, but they are in need of overhaul and reform. Currently, the status quo is that we have an extraordinarily hard time tracking federal dollars from end to end. This is due in large part to a broken chain of data collection, of reporting information, and the ability to monitor and track in real time what is happening with federal dollars. This informational black hole is where a lot of impropriety happens. It's where waste, fraud, and abuse live. And yes, this is where improper payments often happen. But more importantly, we also don't have a good, clear, and consistent way of understanding what is happening with tax dollars at the end point. What is the impact that we're having? What is the return on investment that we're having? We now have an annual budget of close to $7 trillion a year. We can't say with any degree of clarity and consistency what we're getting for all of that money. We have some more good news, though. There are bipartisan efforts, and there have been for years, to try and clean up this situation. We at POGO have had the privilege and pleasure of working on some of those initiatives. We were a part of the Federal Taxpayers' Right to Know Act being passed into law just a couple of years ago, which created for the very first time a program inventory of all the programs in the federal government, and that would be available to the public. We have worked with a member of this very committee, the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, to introduce a piece of legislation that would bring more transparency to federal subaward reporting. We have supported and endorsed multiple pieces of legislation that take direct aim at the improper payments issue. We also have additional ideas that don't yet have congressional champions. One proposal is to clean up and modernize and standardize the award descriptions that are available in USA Spending to make them more useful and relevant. We have another proposal to harmonize the amount of data and information we collect between contract spending and non-contract spending. We stand ready, willing, and able to work with anybody who wants to work with us on these common sense solutions. Lastly, I want to put in a quick word for Congress.
Yeah.
And specifically, I want to
The gentleman's time has expired.
Apologies.
Yes.
I can't see the flashing light.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Hetler. Got it. We appreciate your testimony. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. I'd like to thank our witnesses today for your testimonies and the suggestions that you have brought before this committee. I'd also like to thank Chairman Comer for this opportunity to chair the Historic Oversight Subcommittee on DOGE. Americans are shocked to learn that $2.7 trillion of their hard-earned tax dollars have been stolen or wasted in improper payments since 2003. You see, in the private sector, companies can't continue to run if they keep employees that allow waste and abuse with their resources. But that has continued for decades here in the federal government. Mr. Talcove, do private sector companies have a lower rate of improper payments than the federal government?
Yes, the fraud rate, that the criminals are taking advantage of in the public sector is around 20%. In the private sector, it's around 3%. And it's really because the tools that are used in the private sector aren't used in the public sector. Front-end identity verification, self-certification, and then finally making sure that individuals are who they say they are. If we start using these tools, you will see the fraud rate go down dramatically, because for the most part, this fraud isn't taking place by real individuals. It's individuals whose identities have been stolen on the dark web. They use that information pretending to be somebody else. And because of the antiquated systems, processes, and technologies in place in government programs, they're able to steal at scale.
Right. So, Mr. Talcove, we would say that private companies that pretty much have to exist on a 20% profit rate they're not allowed. They can't continue to be successful if they were to allow their customers' data to be stolen like that and used by criminals. However, the federal government, who can continue printing checks and continue in operation, never fixes its problems because it can't be forced to go out of business. Would you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yes. One of the things I noticed during COVID was the criminals learned that government was the mark because it never runs out of money. And they focus on it at scale. And then the likelihood of getting caught is virtually zero.
I think it's outrageous for Americans to know that their identity can be stolen and then used for child trafficking, drug trafficking, and terrorism, like you stated in your opening statement. Ms. Royal, your testimony states that many programs operate under essentially an honor system in which applicants need not verify their identity, income, residency, or other key eligibility factors. You call this a trust everyone instead of a trust by verify approach. Does this mean the federal government in some states are giving out billions of dollars to individuals without verifying who they are or whether they meet program eligibility requirements?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
That's outrageous. Do states have enough incentive to prevent fraud and to recover improper payments?
No, and in fact, states are hesitant to spend their state dollars to protect federal dollars.
Would greater investment in program integrity efforts yield a positive return for taxpayers?
Yes, it could easily be self-funding.
Amazing. Mr. Whitson, your testimony states that both the Biden and Obama administrations issued rules and guidance that made it harder for states to verify eligibility for Medicaid. You say that repealing Biden's Medicaid streamlining rule would save $164 billion over 10 years because the rule restricts eligibility verification that states can perform. Can you explain why this rule is so costly?
Yeah, so the rule does a number of things, but for instance, it prohibits states from verifying eligibility more than once a year. So for non-disabled folks to just go in and look and say, hey, are you still eligible for the program? It says you are forbidden from doing that any more often than once a year. And so obviously people's lives change, and so they may become ineligible, and so it's designed to keep them on the program. Another thing, it prohibits in-person or phone interviews to verify their identity. So people apply for it, and then the person on the other end says, oh, I just want to call and make sure this is a real person, not someone in another country or whatever. The rule prohibits that. And so there's a number of other provisions. It also opens a lengthy reconsideration periods. And this is where illegal immigrants are able to obtain the benefits. And so basically it says once you get these benefits, you can't interfere with it for a 90-day period or longer. And so there's a number of horrible things. But.
So we can't verify if someone is illegal or legal receiving benefits. Just to correct that, yes or no?
You have to wait a state has to wait at least 90 days. And actually what we're seeing is it's led some states to wait as long as 13 years. And so on the program.
Unbelievable. My time has expired. Thank you very much. I now recognize Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts for 5 minutes.
Hello, Mark Barden here from Sandy Hook Promise. On December 14th, 2000.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First of all, let me congratulate you and also Ms. Stansbury on your new positions. And I want to thank the witnesses for your testimony. We've already heard some good ideas about how to work together. And Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, I, for one, would be most open to working with POGO and trying to work on some of the legislative ideas that you have to actually get at some of this waste, fraud, and abuse. Since this is my first opportunity to speak in this new subcommittee as the representative for the 8th Congressional District in Massachusetts, I want to first of all make clear that my primary purpose in seeking appointment to this subcommittee is for the singular and sacred purpose to defend our democracy, which I believe is under attack in this country, and to uphold my oath to support and defend the Constitution against those who might secretly or openly seek its destruction. Make no mistake, this is a moment for representative democracy. This is a test of our resolve. In the coming days and weeks, we will all get to decide whether we stand with a couple of billionaires who, despite their own financial successes, still harbor such grievances in their hearts that after all that democracy has provided to them, they remain animated by the desire to dismantle this democratic government and to punch down at some of the weakest and most vulnerable in our society. Two men who clearly understand that the easiest way to incite large numbers of people is to use social media to exploit the dynamic forces of hatred and fear. Madam Chair, if we're going after waste, fraud, and abuse, let's start with abuse. Abuse of power. As of yesterday, there were 55 lawsuits under consideration by the federal courts across our nation as a result of Elon Musk's and President Trump's unlawful acts. Many of those lawsuits have already been sustained by the federal district courts and orders have been rendered to undo those unlawful acts. But this is just the beginning, and Congress has an important role to play. And I, for one, look forward to that opportunity. This is a moment of great consequence for our country and for our democracy, and I remain grateful to the good people of the 8th Congressional District of Massachusetts who sent me here. Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, again, happy to join you on some of your efforts. POGO has worked very closely with our IG community. Is that right? The Inspector Generals?
Yeah, that's correct, Congressman.
I know your work is very much similar to what we ask our Inspectors Generals to undertake. I want to ask you, what do you think? So in the most recent report from the Inspector Generals, and this is the Council of the Inspector Generals, a nonpartisan group on integrity and efficiency in government, they identified more than $93 billion in potential savings. So the first thing that President Trump did coming into office was to fire 17 agency inspectors general. What can you tell us from POGO's standpoint? What does that do to our ability to identify and root out waste, fraud, and abuse?
Thank you, Congressman. I would say, to put it simply, it completely undermines our ability to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Inspector General exists for essentially one purpose, and they were originally created in the immediate aftermath of Watergate. And I think you all probably do not need me to give you a history lesson at all on what happened in the Watergate era. There's a reason they were created at that time, because there was a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse happening, and there were not cops on the beat that were internal, that were independent, that were situated in agencies to be able to find these things and expose them and do something about them. That's what Inspector General exists to do. So it's completely anathema to, I'd say anathema to any stated mission to find cost savings and to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, to fire Inspector General and to undermine them. It makes no sense. Those two things do not add up.
Thank you very much. The firings that occurred on the when President Trump came to office included the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction, Mr. Sopko. I actually did over 20 trips to Afghanistan working with him. He actually uncovered $4 billion in savings in rooting out American taxpayer waste being conducted in Afghanistan. The IG at the Department of Defense, the agency.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back. Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank you.
that. Thank you.
I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cloud.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For far too long, DC politicians have gotten away with measuring their personal value and worth by how much of other people's money they give away. And for far too long, they self-righteously have opined that the spending was for altruistic purposes given out of care and compassion. For far too long, they've been more concerned with looking like they cared than having enough care and concern to actually do the due diligence to ensure that the tax dollars were being used wisely and effectively. And for far too long, those of us who've worked to uncover waste, fraud, and abuse have had to deal with what amounts to an unconstitutional fourth branch of permanent bureaucracy that has too often worked to ignore, obfuscate, delay, and frustrate our efforts to bring transparency and oversight. Over the last few weeks, the DOGE effort has begun to uncover not only how massive the waste, fraud, and abuse is, but also the extent at which DC politicians and too many obstinate bureaucrats have coordinated to create what is essentially the largest money laundering scheme in history. And while Americans have been working to make ends meet, They have been using taxpayer dollars to fund unnecessary, egregious, and even evil things here at home and around the world. Thankfully, in DOGE, we have a president bringing the leadership needed and a focused effort, along with the talent, technology, tools, and transparency to this waste, fraud, and abuse. And to those who would stand opposed to this effort, I would just point out, while it's understandable to find waste, fraud, and abuse that has grown and metastasized in this government even over decades, certainly accelerated over the last few years, to continue to protect it is corruption. I want to thank the chair for beginning this war on waste on this side of Pennsylvania Avenue and bringing together this committee. This effort is so important as we work to relieve the Americans, people of this burden of waste, fraud, and abuse. Mr. Talco, you mentioned in your written statement and talked about it in your statement at the beginning that this waste, fraud, and abuse is a national security threat. And certainly one of the challenges facing us that is a national security threat is our fiscal situation. And so we have got to find ways to find savings to the American people in order to bring confidence to the bond markets, to put our country on a fiscal footing, and to reverse the curse, so to speak, that we are placing on our children and our grandchildren. You mentioned a couple threats, though. You mentioned internal threats. You said that these cases involve government employees, individuals entrusted with administering benefits who, instead of using their positions to approve fraudulent claims, override security controls, or even sell sensitive claimant information for profit. Now, this is not every federal employee for sure, but within the context of people who are trying to give their best effort, we have an internal threat. But you also mentioned transnational fraud rings, terrorist organizations, nation states, North Korea, nuclear weapons programs funded by our tax dollars, China, Nigeria, Iran, Romania, Russia, not our friends necessarily, that are being funded by taxpayer dollars. Could you give us some examples of how this is happening?
Yeah. So when you think about what happened during the pandemic, $1 trillion was stolen. 70% of that money went overseas. And I can give you some examples. In a Western state, they had more people applying for unemployment insurance benefits than they had individuals over 18. The people that were stealing the money from Romania were using it to facilitate other fraud schemes that include fentanyl, that include doing things to impact our democracy. On the insider threat, right, the first thing you have to say, and my dad was a public servant, is 99% of people that work in the public sector are honest, hardworking individuals. But there are some, and what you need is data and technology to root that out. There were examples during the pandemic. There were some examples even of last week where people got into the Medicaid system in a Western state and stole $50 million in less than 4 months. So you have to have these controls in place, right? These aren't individuals stealing, Mr. Cloud. These are organized criminal groups, both domestic and transnational.
That, as you mentioned, taxpayers are being forced to fund the demise of our own country. Mr. Whitson, I wanted to ask you, because there's a lot of talk about reconciliation right now. You mentioned Medicaid and what could be done to bring a pretty substantial amount of savings, and this is without affecting those who truly need Medicaid and for what the purpose of the program was extended for. Now,
the gentleman's time has expired.
Hopefully-
Does the witness want to answer the question?
No, only to
quickly.
say that, yes, there's a tremendous amount of savings that can be found from the streamlining rule, but also work requirements in the program is another big area that can be done in reconciliation, and could save a significant amount as well, $241 billion in federal spending over 10 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Garcia.
Well, thank you. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here. And I want to just start off by making something clear. I think we're all here to fight against the lies, the corruptions, and the attacks on our social safety net. Now, we should in no way be cooperating with House Republicans who want to shut down the Department of Education and destroy Medicare and Medicaid. And we should not stand by as the richest man on the planet gives himself and his companies huge tax cuts while the American people get absolutely nothing. Now, I find it ironic, of course, that our chairwoman, Congresswoman Green is in charge of running this committee. Now, in the last Congress, Chairwoman Green literally showed a dick pic in our oversight congressional hearing. So I thought I'd bring one as well. Now, this, of course, we know is President Elon Musk. He's also the world's richest man. He was the biggest political donor in the last election. He has billions of dollars in conflicts of interest.
Hey there, no need to adjust your TV, or more likely your phone. You're watching a recycled commercial.
And we know that he is leading a power grab, also abided by and encouraged by Donald Trump and, of course, the chairwoman, Congresswoman Green. But I also want to run through what DOGE actually is going to do. It's a demolition plan that's going to run through our government. DOGE is trying to abolish the Department of Education. That means opportunities denied to kids. It means you're ripping away opportunities for children with disabilities who are dependent on this money. You're also halting medical research, which is also critical, which we have to also stop. The idea that we're going to eliminate or destroy the Department of National Institutes of Health, NIH, is crazy. Let's talk about the Department of Labor. We're talking about protections for working people across this country, where people can actually complain about abuses their companies are making against them and their coworkers. Workers are now going to be in danger. Let's also talk about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, another huge issue for us. Think about the scammers and fraudsters that will be empowered across this country because Elon Musk wants, essentially, these companies have more power over consumers and over people across this country. Look at the Centers for Disease and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That is actually what's being discussed partly today. Healthcare, we're talking about being denied to millions of poor people, working class people across this country. And now, of course, they're on to their largest target, the U.S. Social Security Administration. We're talking about the destruction of the actual social safety net in this country. We know that 1 in 5 Americans collect Social Security, seniors, disabled people. This entire plan is about hurting the American social safety net and destroying our institutions. And it's important that we actually call out what is happening at this subcommittee. This is not about working with the richest man on the planet. This is actually about empowering. This committee wants to empower the richest person in the world to hurt people so they can take all of this money that they so-called want to save and then give it to themselves, their companies, and their billionaire friends. That is the attack that is happening in this committee and across this country, and it's important that we call it out. We also know, of course, that Elon Musk is sending his unqualified DOGE staff to carry out this agenda across all these agencies. And in some cases, actually teenage staffers. No accountability, no experience, and problematic records. They're trying to rob you, and they're probably a minor. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields, and I now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Timmons, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I find it sad that my colleagues across the aisle can't take this seriously. We have $36 trillion in debt. We run an annual almost $2 trillion deficit. When I got elected 6 years ago, we had $21 trillion in debt. So in 6 years, we've added over $15 trillion to the debt. And guess what? President Trump ran on fixing this problem. President Trump told the American people he would right the ship financially. And he said during the campaign that Elon Musk was going to be the person to lead this charge. The man that has turned business after business around. He's the richest man on the planet because he succeeds at his endeavors. And that's why President Trump has appointed him the head of this effort. This is a very serious problem. And it's incredibly hypocritical that my colleagues across the aisle are complaining about this because Joe Biden signed his name and wanted the American people to believe that he had the ability to forgive $250 billion with a signature. Guess what? Supreme Court ruled he did not. That's our system of checks and balances. The president, Biden, he clearly was experiencing cognitive decline. He didn't even have the ability to be charged with a crime as determined by his own Department of Justice. But he signs his name and he thinks it gives $250 billion away, redistributes taxpayer dollars. It's just crazy that we can't come together to address the greatest national security threat facing this country, our debt. Now to the task at hand, Medicaid fraud. Mr. Talkov, if we implement enhanced identity verification and enhanced income verification, what will happen? How much money will we save?
You'll save hundreds of billions of dollars. Identity verification, elimination of self-certification, and monitoring beneficiaries will prevent these transnational criminal groups from accessing those systems at scale so legitimate people who need the benefits can get them in a timely fashion.
So we're going to get actual benefits to people, to American citizens that are in need faster.
My whole career, I was pretty much bald, so people just got to know me as being a bald guy. I did wonder what it would be like if I could have hair.
When you have different camera angles and it's getting different parts of your head, all of a sudden now things start sticking out.
You're trying all the different hairstyles and trying to do all these things to try and hide it, but you really know that it's not really hiding it.
Because if you do it electronically through web-based, like they did in Missouri, where the pilot program saved almost 20% of Medicaid dollars. So all we have to do is adopt what has already been proven in Missouri, and we'll save 20%. To the people out there listening, we spend almost $900 billion every year on Medicaid. And if 20% of that is saved, that's almost $200 billion. We got a $1.8 trillion annual deficit. We just knocked off $200 billion. Let's keep this train going. The fact that the Democrats are filing lawsuit after lawsuit to impede the efforts of President Trump to right our fiscal ship is unforgivable. It's unforgivable. Mr. Talkov, you talked about pandemic fraud. I have a bill that would cause the IRS to share data with the Small Business Administration and the FBI and the Department of Justice that would show that you were ineligible for PPP loans and you got them. So I think that would save probably $100 billion. Do you think that we should go back and take money away from people that fraudulently got COVID money?
Yeah. During the pandemic, the PPP program was a virtual buffet for fraudsters. And it was because of that 1974 Privacy Act, where data sharing and matching is virtually impossible. Congress needs to change that.
But we can do it retroactively. We can do it retroactively. We can find the people that stole this money, hold them accountable, probably get some of the money back. So I already have that bill filed. That bill, I think, would probably get $100 billion. So now we got enhanced identity verification, enhanced income verification that has been proven in Missouri. It does work. So I'm working on that bill. We're going to drop it soon. That's $200 billion. There's a competition in Congress. I think we should have a competition on this committee. I got $300 billion in savings proposed. We got to all pull our weight because we have such a massive problem right now. But I would just ask my colleagues across the aisle to get out of the way if you don't want to help. If you don't want to help right the fiscal ship in this country, get out of the way. Stop filing lawsuit after lawsuit. We do not have the financial ability to continue down this path. And we're going to save this country with or without you. You can kick and scream all the way, or you can get out of the way. I prefer the former. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Kassar.
This subcommittee is supposedly about looking into waste, fraud, and abuse. So I'd like to start talking about independent inspector generals who are supposed to be looking into waste, fraud, and abuse. Mr. Talkov, do you know how many inspector generals at agencies that were investigating Elon Musk's companies have been fired by the Trump-Musk administration?
No.
It is 5. Ms. Royal, the Inspector General of the Department of Labor had 17 open investigations into Tesla and SpaceX. Do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
No.
They fired him. And I think y'all know. Mr. Whitson, the Inspector General of the Department of Transportation was investigating Tesla. Do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
No.
They were fired. The Department of Defense's Inspector General was looking into SpaceX. Mr. Hedler, do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
I believe he was fired.
Thank you. I think everybody on the panel knows what the answer to these questions were. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Inspector General was investigating Musk's Neuralink. Mr. Talcove, now I'll ask you again under oath, do you know what Mr. Trump did to that Inspector General that was looking into one of Musk's companies?
No.
He was fired. The Inspector General at the EPA was repeatedly taking on Tesla. Mr. Hedler, since it seems that you're answering the questions that everyone knows the answer to, do you know what the Trump-Musk administration did to that Inspector General?
I believe he was also fired.
Also fired. At least 5 Inspector Generals that were looking into Elon Musk's companies were fired by the Trump-Musk administration. These Inspector Generals, who are independent, protected by law, they are the people that find the waste, fraud, and abuse and found many of the cases of waste, fraud, and abuse that have been brought up today, fired because they were looking into Elon Musk. At the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, which is supposed to protect workers from getting their unions busted by folks like Elon Musk, made functionally broken by the so-called Department of Government Efficiency that really is the Department of Government Efficiency for Elon Musk, not for you. They are trying to shut down the Department of Education, the Department of Labor. You know what Elon Musk doesn't seem to be looking into? His own contracts. Again, I'll ask you, Mr. Talcove, do you know how much money a day Mr. Musk will receive from the federal government for his contracts?
Weeds controlled.
Visit weedman.com for a free quote.
Why do we do things the hard way? Coming through. It's so backwards. It's 2025. This is taxes?
Issa, I got all. No. The answer is $8 million a day. Just last year, Elon Musk was promised $3 billion from close to 100 contracts with the federal government. Ms. Royal, do you know how much the average person in this country who survives on Social Security, one of our seniors who's worked their entire life, about how much they have to survive on a day?
I do not.
$65 a day. We're not looking into Elon Musk's $8 million a day. This subcommittee, chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene and the House Republicans, is looking into your grandmother's $65 a day. Let me be clear. I think we would all support taxpayer savings, look into money we might needlessly send to billionaires and big corporations, find taxpayer savings, and send it back to your hardworking family. But instead, what House Republicans and the Trump-Musk administration want to do is they want to look into your kids' lunch money, your kids' teacher's salary, into your grandparents' Social Security. They want to take that money and give it out in billionaire tax cuts. And they are talking about that in committee tomorrow, in budget committee tomorrow. They just released their plan. So let me be clear. When Republicans talk about government efficiency in this Congress, they're not looking into billionaires who don't pay their taxes. They're not looking into billionaires who get rich off of government contracts. They're not looking into Elon Musk firing watchdogs who are supposed to keep him accountable. They're looking at cutting your public schools. They're going straight for your Social Security. They're coming straight for cancer research. They're coming straight for the Department of Education. They're not looking at big tech. They're not looking at big pharma because those people fund their campaigns. If this committee were serious about rooting out waste from our federal government, then today's whole hearing would be about how Musk and Donald Trump are firing the independent watchdogs who've done this work for decades. Instead, my Republican colleagues' actual goal on this committee is to distract from Trump and from Musk's corrupt war on accountability. This will not be a subcommittee dedicated to making government efficient for everyday people. It's about helping Elon Musk and Donald Trump be as efficient as possible in robbing our government and handing out our government services to the rich. So this seems that this subcommittee is just
the gentleman's
like
time
the
is
agency it's named
expired.
after.
The
A
gentleman's
sham,
time has expired.
a total sham.
The American people are $36 trillion in debt. It certainly seems reasonable that someone has been fired. I now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee.
You're going to put us
Mr.
further in debt
Burchett.
with your billionaire
You're
tax
not
cuts.
recognized. Mr. Burchett, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. The gravy train for a lot of these folks, it's been on biscuit wheels and it's about to run off the dadgum tracks, and it's about time. Could you imagine standing up here in defending waste, fraud, and abuse. But I think that's what we're seeing. When people squeal and don't ask questions, I think it shows the American public what the heck's going on. And that little gravy train is getting ready to run out. The spigot is getting ready to be turned off. Mr. Talcove, that's correct how you say your name, brother?
Yes, sir.
All right. How can the federal government improve identity verification for these entitlement programs?
Yeah, it's doing what the private sector does every single day, whether you use your bank, you go to Amazon, using those tools and moving away from some of the dated compliance standards that the federal government uses. NIST IAL 863, 2017, before there was anything called deepfakes and generative AI tools.
Also, I was informed that PayPal has never been, they've never been able to crack into that and steal people's vital information. Are they using those systems that you would be favorable towards that government seems to be shying away from?
Yes, sir.
And describe that, how that works.
They're systems that are based on encryption. They use technology and they use data to validate you are who you say you are. The people that are stealing right now, I believe a lot of them are actually ghosts from China, Russia, Nigeria, and Romania.
I read a report today that North Korea was involved in this, in some of that as well.
They are.
And those people are our enemies. Again, they'll hate us for free. We don't have to give them taxpayer money. And are there loopholes that can be closed to avoid these improper payments? And I wish you'd describe those to me.
The biggest, most important thing, particularly in the benefit program space, is the use of self-certification. As Mr. Timmons noted, the state of Missouri is using a solution called Steady IQ to validate wages and wealth. You cannot allow individuals to provide the information based upon what they think. It has to be based on what you know, and that will stop the ghosts from using people's identities to steal money from U.S. taxpayers.
I know this is hard to hear, but it's important. The shooter who murdered my beautiful butterfly Dylan carried a highly lethal weapon into Sandy Hook Elementary. In approximately 4 minutes, he shot 154 bullets, killing 20 children and 6 educators. 5 of those bullets hit Dylan, and in an instant, my little boy was gone. And too many other families are suffering the same anguish as mine. Firearms are the leading cause of death for America's children. A lack of comprehensive school shooting prevention laws are putting our nation's children in danger of similar attacks. Every day in the U.S., 12 children die from gun violence. Many of them are shot in places where they should be safest, like their classrooms and school playgrounds. It's long past time for Congress to take action to stop these tragedies. So please sign our petition now to ramp up the pressure on Congress to finally take action to stop school shootings before more lives are already senselessly taken. Thank you.
In less than a decade, AI will be unavoidable, shaping every aspect of your daily life. In fact, it's already changing the way that people work, and if you don't learn how to use it now, you'll be way behind. Lucky for you, I found the best-kept AI secret that nobody's talking about. The constant battle to manage your time can leave you exhausted, and traditional calendars just aren't cutting it anymore. Imagine if AI could take over, reshuffling your day as things change, because let's be honest, they always do, making sure that you're always on top of what matters most. Well, that's exactly what Motion does, giving you back control of your time. Check this out. It's simple. All you have to do is make a new task. Fill out a couple details like how long you think it might take you, what priority it is, and what your deadline is. Then Motion does all the hard work of slotting it into your calendar at a time that's best for you. The whole process takes about 5 seconds. And if that's not enough, if you don't end up getting to a task, Motion does something that no other to-do app does. It automatically shuffles your unchecked tasks to the next ideal time slot, meaning that you'll never have to deal with a task being past due. If you happen to get a task done early, Motion will move the next task into that planned time slot so that you never have to wonder what you need to work on next. On top of that, Motion is super minimal and aesthetically pleasing, meaning that it fits almost natively into whatever operating system you have. While others are struggling to keep track of their tasks and events, you can be way ahead of the curve using AI to increase your own personal productivity. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's gotta cost a fortune to hire your own AI personal assistant, right? Well, no, actually, it's only 62 cents per day. That's about 85% less than the average price of coffee. The best part, you can try it out for free for 7 days, literally right now, and be a part of the 1% of people who can actually start living their lives now that their tasks are organized.
How much money do you calculate is wasted due to waste, fraud, and abuse in the entitlement programs each year?
Yeah, my number right now between federal, state, and local government is you can save $1 trillion a year by simply putting in front-end identity verification, eliminating self-certification, and monitoring the back end of the programs that are providing the benefits. Those three things.
You said you could eliminate that, but there are others you feel like some more low-hanging fruit?
I would start with those three things because they're simple. That'll take that 20% fraud rate that you're seeing in the public sector down below 5%.
Chair Lady, I would suggest that we adopt Mr. Timmons' legislation and get that out of the committee as fast as possible. What actions also could Congress take to fix these problems quickly?
Yeah, I think the first thing is updating and redoing the 1974 Privacy Act. That is virtually impossible to do data matching. It's very difficult to have data shared. And when you look back at the pandemic, data sharing and data matching would have stopped probably 50% of the $1 trillion that was stolen from taxpayers.
Do any of y'all like to add anything to that?
Congressman, I would just add that rather than accepting self-attestation, that states should have to be required to actually verify people's identities. And here's the key part: before they get enrolled, they shouldn't get enrolled and then eventually come down later on down the road.
It's amazing to me. I have a doctor's appointment back in Knoxville, and the verification process is very extensive. It's more so than the federal government requires for any of this. What type of computer systems are these agencies using, and do they need updating?
They're using very dated technology, but they're also burdened. I look at the USDA, 6.2 million words in a 10,000-page document that shows how to implement the rules of the program. Nobody can figure that out. So one of the things that I think has to happen is the simplification of these processes and systems, and then just use the technology that we use every day in the private sector.
Okay, thank y'all so much for being
The
here.
gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Chair Lady.
I now recognize the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Talcove, I'm just going to go ahead and pick up where you left off really quickly. Just to be clear, the upgrades that you're talking about as it relates to our data processes, these aren't things that would be free, are they? They would cost some kind of money. Not looking for a number, but they will cost, correct?
Some are free and some would cost money.
Okay. All right. So I just want to leave it there because we've had a number of these hearings. So I do want to be clear, before the Trump administration came in, this committee did exist in the form of the Oversight Committee, and our task is to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. In that vein, we had a number of hearings, at least last term. I can't speak for any other term as I'm only in my sophomore term. And we dealt with improper payments. And interestingly enough, our chairwoman, who is so passionate about this today, she missed every single one of those improper payment hearings. But just to be clear, I was there. So I don't want anyone to believe that Democrats just come to work and don't plan to do work. In fact, I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is that the Republicans believe our job is, because right now they have relinquished their constitutional duties over to an unelected bureaucrat, someone who no one went out to vote for. And absolutely, he is occupying the Oval Office, as we saw yesterday. And that is a first for me to see someone occupying the Oval Office who's never actually been elected to the Oval Office and actually answering more questions than the person that allegedly got elected. But for whatever reason, this is the first time we're having a DOGE subcommittee hearing, and that guy's not here. Instead, we have y'all. So I do want to thank you for coming. But I will say this, it's also interesting to me that in the first few days of DOGE existing, we know that they are trying to get rid of the Department of Education, USAID, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're laying off FAA workers. They are going after the FDA, the CDC, the HHS, the FBI agents, and they're talking about getting rid of FEMA. And they brought y'all in. And I am going to say that I actually was shocked that there was only one person that seemed like he was an overt Trumper as you laid out your opening remarks, because I anticipated that at least one of y'all would say, yes, what Elon is doing is exactly what we would prescribe. But instead,
if your matching set doesn't make you this excited, then you just haven't tried a Comfort set yet. Comfort is a mental health supporting brand that makes all of their clothing with a slightly weighted, slightly oversized material and a buttery, soft fabric that truly feels.
I will applaud you because you actually were focused. You talked about what the American people are looking for us to do. We've actually consistently on this side of the aisle promoted this idea of making investments into technology so that we can do things such as, say, look at the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense that takes up approximately 50% of our discretionary income or our discretionary spending. Approximately 50% goes to Department of Defense. Department of Defense has not been able to pass an audit in the last 6 audits, and we're not talking about pennies. I understand that we want everything to be perfect, and if we could get all waste, fraud, and abuse out, that would be fantastic. But let me talk about the big numbers. The big numbers are on that side. When we look at, say, our entire workforce, our federal workforce, as we're trying to somehow fire all of them, they don't even make up a total of 5%. It's even less than that when we look at our budget. But let's talk about defense. That just happens to be the same side of the ledger that Mr. Musk gets the vast majority of his money from. In fact, at the same time that they were unlawfully, and we will stay in court, because on this side, we believe in law and order. We believe in, a number of us are actually lawyers, but nevertheless, we understand the Constitution. We believe in that as well. And so there's things such as, impoundment, right? Because as Mr. Whitson said, he said, we need to return the power of the purse to Congress. It never left. According to the Constitution, that's where it's at. Now, I know that people are confused right now because for whatever reason, we had a guy that went in, and you talk about people invading our data. Listen, people said that they were upset about TikTok, but I'm upset about the guy that runs Twitter, who for sure is doing nefarious things, because I don't understand, if you are trying to conduct audits and figure out where the waste, fraud, and abuse is, I don't know why you would go to some tech guy. In fact, it was only techies that were sitting there at inauguration. We didn't have auditors. I would welcome auditors to come in and do forensic audits. In fact, he sat there in the Oval Office yesterday and he admitted that he was lying, and he was using his propaganda machine to do it when he said that we sent millions of dollars to Gaza for condoms. That was a lie. So let me tell you something.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
It's time for
the
us
gentlelady's
to do our
time has
job
expired.
and rein in this rogue actor known
The
as
gentlelady's
Elon
time
Musk.
has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Burleson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak frankly at first to the American people. We're nearing $37 trillion in national debt. What does that mean? That means that each and every U.S. taxpayer owes over $323,000. Okay, what does that mean? That means when the EPIC, which is the Economic Policy Innovation Center, says we have 18 trillion left. That's it, 18 trillion left to take out, and we're spending $2 trillion in debt every year. Folks, we're at the precipice of a debt, we're like a debt cycle. We are literally at a point in which the dollar will be worth nothing. What does that mean? And we know Social Security goes bankrupt in 8 years, right? Medicare goes bankrupt in 10 years. And then 15 years from now, the dollar is completely devalued and worth nothing. So what does that mean? That means your pension, the money in your bank, your savings is nothing. It's worthless. So what are we doing? We're trying to save this country. We're trying to save your pensions. We're trying to save your bank accounts. We're trying to save this country for the next generation. And it would be nice if we had help. But instead, we have people that are fighting us on this. And, I think that I would hate to be in the Democratic Party right now because you're in a really bad bind. You're having to defend all of this crazy spending, all of this crazy waste. So how do you do it? You do ad hominem attacks. You attack the messenger. Oh, Elon Musk, right? He's rich. He must be evil, right? That's the attacks. Really, you can't do any better than that, right? Let's talk on the policy. Help us. We're trying to save this country. This is what, and Elon Musk, who's making no money doing this, is trying to save this country. Why? Because he has invested in the United States of America more than anybody, right? So I think that we should embrace it. In fact, not a single company, governor of any state would ever turn down Elon Musk and his team of DOGE from coming in and providing free services to right the course and financially in any state or organization. It's ridiculous that we would demonize someone that loves this country so much. Mr. Whitman, the formation of agencies via the executive action is not new, right? The formation of DOGE is not new. Can you, are you familiar with any other previous presidencies where they've formed organizations like DOGE via executive action?
First-rate fertilization.
Visit weedman.com for a free quote.
Most people my age are slowing down, but I'm more active than ever. Hi, my name's Dr. Frank Schallenberger.
Yeah, so actually the agency that DOGE is occupying is one that was created in a previous administration. So it is something that happens routinely. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, there's been the Office of Budget Management was created, Environmental Protection Agency was created, the U.S. Digital Service, which is now DOGE, was created all by executive order, right?
And actually one other I'd add is USAID was originally created through an executive order by President Kennedy and then later formalized.
And then, Madam Chair, I have a video I would like to end with that just, let's review, if we could cue that, to remind, and I want to remind my Democratic friends, at a point in which you once had the majority of the American people on your side, this is what your party believed in.
This report tells us how to cut waste, cut red tape, streamline the bureaucracy, change procurement rules, change the personnel rules, and create a government that works better and costs less.
I've read it, and where it says the president should, the president will.
Among the 800 recommendations, eliminating 12% of the federal workforce, merging some government agencies like the FBI, the DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, closing hundreds of government offices outside Washington.
From the day I took office, one of the commitments that I made to the American people was that we would do a better job here in Washington in rooting out wasteful spending. We thought that it was entirely appropriate for our governments and our agencies to try to root out waste, large and small, in a systematic way. It means cutting some programs that I think are worthy, but we may not be able to afford right now. A lot of the action is in Congress and legislative, but in the meantime, we don't need to wait for Congress in order to do something about wasteful spending that's out there. We haven't seen as much action out of Congress as we'd like, and that's why we launched on our own initiative the campaign to cut waste. And we're going to keep on finding every possible way that we can do that, even if Congress is not acting. There you go.
I think it speaks for itself. My time has expired.
The gentleman's time has expired. Thank you. I now yield to the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Our Republican colleagues and the Trump administration continue to demonize our friends and neighbors who work for the federal government and swear an oath to protect the Constitution and serve the public. Thousands of civilian federal employees have given their lives in the line of duty for their country. The administration seems intent on dismantling much of the federal government in violation of the Constitution, statutes, and regulations. And our Republican colleagues are letting them do it. They want to gut the nonpartisan civil service and to convert a significant portion of the remaining civil service into political appointees. Depriving the federal government of employees' expertise and experience will harm the services that the government provides to all Americans. Mr. Hetler-Garlett, the administration is attempting to cause a mass exodus from our federal workforce. Will this increase or decrease waste, fraud, and abuse?
Thank you, Delegate Norton. I think it's pretty clear that chaos is not the friend of efficiency. If you undermine the very functionality of the government, you're not going to make it more efficient. You're going to make it worse. And it's going to cost even more money to recoup or to fix things that go wrong in the interim. So again, I mentioned earlier that if you care about waste, fraud, and abuse, firing Inspector General doesn't add up. I think if you care about government being more efficient, I think intentionally creating chaos is the opposite of that.
Well, Mr. Hetler-Garlett, do federal employees operate without oversight or rules and regulations?
No, absolutely not. They are governed by plenty of rules and regulations. And when there are independent inspector general at the agency they're supposed to be at, they also have a cop on the beat making sure that they do so.
I want to highlight some stories demonstrating exactly the kinds of federal workers the administration is trying to force out. How about Chris Mark at the Department of Labor, whose pioneering work on mine safety has reduced minor safety deaths from roof collapses to almost zero today? Or Jared Koopman at the Internal Revenue Service, who pioneered new methods for tracking criminal cybersecurity currency transactions that led to the rescue of 23 children from rape and assault, as well as the seizure of hundreds of millions of child abuse videos and 370 pedophile arrests. This work also prevented funding from going to terrorist groups. Or Ronald E. Walters, who manages the 155 national cemeteries.
Planning to move? Join the 6 million families who discovered a smarter, more flexible way to move with Pods.
I was going to introduce you as tech support for the White House, but is that all you do?
I'm wearing my official uniform. Tech support.
You were probably the busiest man on earth prior to January 20th. I don't know what you call yourself now. The first is we're going to talk about DOGE, then we're going to move to AI. And then finally, we're going to conclude with boring cities. Typically, people always start by saying, he overpromises and he won't deliver. They finally see the trend and the trajectory, and they turn out to be supporters. Do you think we'll see that in the government efficiency space?
Well, yes. First of all, I think we've got quite a lot of support from the American public, and I think from maybe around the world. When the public is polled on sort of improving government efficiency, in fact, it is, I believe, the highest polling single issue, meaning that it is something that appeals to voters of all types. And I think improving government efficiency was like almost 70% support, so quite a lot, basically, more than any other issue. So I think the people are very supportive. Obviously, there's certain elements of the bureaucracy that are not supportive because we are moving them from the government sector to the private sector. So at a high level, this is kind of like we're moving people from low to sometimes negative productivity roles in the government sector to higher productivity roles in the private sector. And the net effect of that will be an increase in the output of useful goods and services, which increases the standard of living and well-being of the average American.
And you usually have one key target that you aim to achieve in every single endeavor that you have. So SpaceX is make humanity a multiplanetary species. With Tesla, it's usher in an era of sustainable travel. What is the one main goal for government efficiency that you have for yourself? Is it saving money? Is it doing something else? What is the one main task that you have for yourself?
Yeah, so I guess there's a few ways to describe it, but the actions end up being the same, which is like reducing the size of government and making the government much more accountable to the people, I think is going to lead to a better outcome for the people. What I've said is that we really have here rule of the bureaucracy as opposed to rule of the people, democracy. So we want to restore rule of the people. And so what that means is reducing the size of the federal government, basically reducing regulation. There's a tremendous amount of over-regulation that's happened over time. This is an inevitable consequence of a long period of prosperity, is that you're going to get more and more rules and regulations, more laws accumulate over time. And the normal forcing function for getting rid of rules and regulations is war. So it needs to be some kind of existential war, where you have to do a reset in order to avoid being defeated in a war. This is literally throughout history has been the main forcing function for clearing out an accumulation of laws and regulation. In the absence of that, every year you get more laws and regulations until eventually everything is illegal and nothing is permitted. And that's sort of the situation we have these days. So the aspiration here is a reduction in regulation and reduction in government spending such that the economy is able to grow faster. Maybe the economy can grow at 4 or 5% potentially in terms of real useful goods and services output. And then government spending can be reduced by about 3 or 4% of the economy, maybe $1 trillion or more. And the net effect of that would be no inflation from 2025 to 2026. So that would be quite remarkable. And also, if the US government is buying less debt, which I think will be the case, if the deficit drops from 2 trillion to 1 trillion, then there'll be 1 trillion less debt that the government needs to buy, which will drop, of course, interest rates to drop significantly. And that means people's mortgage payments, car payments, credit card payments, student loans, whatever debt they have, their debt payments will be less. So I think this is something that will benefit the average American. I think some of the things we're doing also will be hopefully helpful to other countries, because with the new administration, there's less interest in interfering with the affairs of other countries. I think a lot of the times the United States has been kind of pushy in international affairs, which may resonate with a number of members of the audience. And I think we should, in general, leave other countries to their own business. And basically, America should mind its own business rather than push for regime change all over the place. So I think it's probably a good thing for other countries too.
So instead of waiting for a war to happen, you went to war against the bureaucracy in the government.
Yes, we're essentially just with the support and direction of President Trump. We are reducing the size of the bureaucracy, getting rid of excess regulatory regulations. And there's also so many agencies and regulatory authorities that they actually step on each other's feet. It's kind of like having a sports game where there are too many referees on the field, like more referees than players at times. Now that would be a silly game if the players can't pass the ball without hitting a referee. But it's kind of getting to that point in the US. So there's roughly 450 federal agencies of one kind or another. That's more agencies. That's almost an average of 2 agencies per year since the formation of the United States. So, I mean, how many agencies do you really need to run a country? Not 450, that's for sure.
And how do you guarantee that all the incredible achievements that you aim to have in terms of savings, in terms of impacting the lives of the American people, are not going to be reversed in 4 years? Typically, the cycle gets reversed every 4 years. Do you think it's going to be so impactful that it won't be reversed? Is there any?
My whole career, I was pretty much bald, so people just got to know me as being a bald guy. I did wonder what it would be like if I could have hair.
When you have different camera angles and it's getting different parts of your head, all of a sudden now things start sticking out.
You're trying all the different hairstyles and trying to do all these things to try and hide it, but you really know that it's not really hiding it.
You start saying, man, I got a nice shaped head for a bald head, You know, that really looks good, but really it don't. You know, really you want hair.
I never thought there was an option for me not to be bald. Once I got my Consultation Act restored, it was an easy decision to make.
Here at Restore, we've mastered a procedure that doesn't require a scalpel or stitches. It's safe and totally undetectable. It's the best method to regrow your own hair.
The Restore process was not painful whatsoever.
It's a simple process, relaxed the whole time.
In the morning, I was out in the afternoon.
I get different reactions every day. People can't believe that it's my hair. I feel better with hair, and I feel like I can pull off more looks.
Immediately after my procedure, I was right back at my normal life.
I feel good about
ways that you can ensure that the progress is going to be continuous.
Well, I think we do need to delete entire agencies as opposed to leave part of them behind. Because if you leave part of them behind, it's easy. It's kind of like leaving a weed. If you don't remove the roots of the weed, then it's easy for the weed to grow back. But if you remove the roots of the weed, it doesn't stop weeds from ever growing back, but it makes it harder. So we have to really delete entire agencies, many of them. Bureaucracy in some new administration, but it'll be from a much lower baseline. So it's a step in the right direction. I think the overarching goal here is to lay the foundation for prosperity that will last many decades, maybe centuries. Nothing's forever, but I think we can strengthen the foundations of the United States substantially.
And what lessons can other governments learn from the US? You say tech support on your shirt. Is that only technology, or is there other things? How do you approach efficiency?
Well, a shocking percentage of the problem, well, maybe it's not shocking for those who know it, but a big percentage of the problem is improving the technology that the government runs on. So the US government runs on a collection of thousands of computers, many of them antiquated, running very old software, and the computers don't talk to each other. In order to make the government more efficient, you have to improve the technology. You may have read about the example I used recently when President Trump was signing one of the DOGE executive orders of the difficulty of US government workers retiring. Like the maximum retirement rate is $10,000 a month. And the reason for that is because the retirement is entirely paperwork right now. It's manually calculated paperwork that's put in an envelope and then taken down a mine shaft and stored in a mine. And then one of the things that affects the rate at which federal workers can retire is the speed of the elevator in a mine in Pennsylvania, which is bizarre because it should be digital, So then when we said, well, why isn't it digital? They said, well, we have had a digitization program going since 2014. So then we asked, well, so how much progress have you made? And they said, B. You mean you're giving yourself a grade of B? No, we're on the letter B. So we're like, okay, we're going to need to really provide some tech support here. Otherwise, literally, people can't even retire, even if they want to. It's pretty bad. There's a lot of software systems that need to be updated and fixed, in some cases deleted. A lot of things that should be automated. I mean, in terms of the number of, say, U.S. citizens that are operating the mine, it's about 1,000 people are working on this mine. They should be working on producing goods and services that are of much higher value to the public, So, I mean, really, even if somebody just grew tomatoes in their garden and sold them at the farmer's market, that would be more useful than carrying manila envelopes down a mine shaft, safe to say. A lot of the stuff is like that. It's not that any one thing is particularly difficult, but there are 10,000 things that need to be improved.
So it's efficiency through innovation rather than efficiency through austerity and cost cutting specifically, right? So you're trying to do both at the same time, maybe focus more on tech support than cutting costs?
Well, by improving the technology, the costs do reduce. So, it's very expensive to have 1,000 people operate a mine with doing paper retirement, whereas that really should just be digitized and be a computer that's with the information stored in the cloud. And it's very straightforward and low cost. So automation, will help there a lot. But a lot of things just really shouldn't exist. They're kind of vestigial. A lot of attention has been on the sort of USAID, for example. When we looked at a lot of those programs, we're like, we should look, why does this actually exist? Is there really a need for it? There's National Endowment for Democracy, but I'm like, okay, well, how much democracy have they achieved lately? I don't know, not much. So the picture they have on their website is a picture of Reagan and Gorbachev. That's been a while. That was like the 80s. So I'm obviously not opposed to democracy, or there's all these things that get funded, but we're like, why does this need taxpayer money? I don't think, it doesn't seem like it does. There's a lot of sort of pushing DEI worldwide. This obviously the Trump administration doesn't agree with, and we want to terminate that stuff, which we are. And make sure the schools focus on improving basic education of kids. As President Trump said, I think yesterday, maybe today, the United States is currently ranked 40th out of 40 in the OECD for education.
Once you try a comfort hoodie, you can't go back to regular hoodies. They're slightly weighted, super oversized. It's that perfect.
Which is pretty bad. But in terms of spending, the United States is spending a tremendous amount per student, but achieving very weak results. So, that's just a case where, okay, we need to spend less money and get better results. It's like a big company, like a big corporation, American Incorporated. And just like with Twitter, there was a lot of stuff that was being done that was unnecessary. In the case of Twitter, we reduced the staff by 80%, but at the same time improved the functionality and capabilities of the site dramatically, and accomplished more in a year than they previously accomplished in 5 years. So it's like a corporate turnaround, but at a much larger scale. And we are giving generous exit packages. If people retire, they get paid all the way through September. They can go on vacation, get a second job, do whatever they want. We can't actually pay them any more than through September because the congressional appropriation is only through the end of the government financial year, which ends in September. So I think there'll be like some disruption, but at the end of the day, we'll have people move from, like I said, from low to negative productivity roles in the government sector to higher productivity roles in the private sector.
Can we pivot to artificial intelligence? And I'm sure you've been seeing what DeepSeek has done and all the claimed achievements that they've had. I know that we've been speaking for a while about Grok 3 and that Grok 3 is going to be a true disruptor in the AI space. When are we going to see that? And what capabilities can we expect from Grok 3?
Well, Grok 3 has very, very powerful reasoning capabilities. In the tests that we've done thus far, Grok 3 is outperforming anything that's been released that we're aware of. In fact, at times I think Grok 3 is kind of scary smart. You're like, wow, this thing's smart. It's kind of scary. Grok 3 is scary. It's like, wow, this thing's, it comes up with solutions that you didn't even think were, like you wouldn't even anticipate, not obvious solutions. So Grok 3 was trained with the most amount of compute, and I think very efficiently trained. Grok 3 was trained on a lot of synthetic data, and then it goes back and forth through the data and tries to achieve logical consistency. If it's got data that is wrong, it'll actually reflect upon that and remove the data that is wrong, that does not concord with reality. So its base reasoning is very good. In fact, even without fine tuning, Grok 3, the base model. So we're really in the final stages of polishing Grok 3. Probably it gets released in about a week or two. I don't want to be hasty in the release because a lot of the final polish is necessary for a great user experience. In some ways, you can think of it like a house. That last 5% where you finish the drywall and do the painting and the trimming, even though it's not much work, it transforms the house. Yeah. So I just want to make sure that last 5% is done really well. It's a week, maybe 2 weeks. I think it'll be very good. And I think we think it'll be better than anything else. And then maybe this might be the last time that any AI is better than Grok.
Looking forward to it. Everyone's excited about it. So I just want to touch upon a topic that was quoted in the media. You offered, I think they said the group that was led by you offered $97 billion for acquiring OpenAI. I personally
take a little round of this.
So I was personally involved in the meeting that you and Sam hosted in 2017. And if you remember, and at that point of time, you were the single largest shareholder. I think you contributed $50 million to the company. So it must hurt.
I don't have any shares, actually. I have no shares in OpenAI.
But at that time, it was a non-profit, right? And it must hurt that you need to pay $97 billion for something that you paid $50 million for in the past.
Yeah.
But I have a specific question here. Can you actually build a company like OpenAI and take it to the scale that you want to take as a nonprofit? Is it possible that you build a company that requires billions of dollars in compute capabilities to build these models while being a nonprofit? Or was it wishful thinking in the beginning and then, you guys parted ways because it couldn't work?
What they're trying to do now is completely delete the nonprofit. That seems to really going too far. I provided all of the funding for OpenAI in the beginning, so the first almost $50 million for nothing, or as a nonprofit, and it was meant to be open source. I think this is analogous to like if you fund a nonprofit to preserve the Amazon rainforest, but instead they turn it into a lumber company and chop down the trees and sell them for wood. You'd be like, wait a second, that's the exact opposite of what I donated the money for. So OpenAI is meant to be open source, nonprofit, and now it is closed. They changed the name to closed for maximum profit AI. Closed for voracious profit. I mean, they're like, whoa, are they after money next level? So why does this change need to occur?
I know that you've been at the forefront of many technologies. Where do you think the biggest economic returns of these models are going to come from? Because currently we're spending billions, and I think you mentioned this before, it's like the gambler syndrome. We're going and spending billions and hoping to pull out a profit at the end of the day. Where do you think the biggest impact in terms of returns are going to be?
Well, I think once you have humanoid robots and deep intelligence, you can basically have quasi-infinite products and services available. So with Tesla building the most advanced humanoid robot, then those humanoid robots can be.
This 7-second trick helped me at the age of 62 eliminate type 2 and toss out my insulin. If I were to die tomorrow, I would want every diabetic, including you, to know this. It sounds crazy, but give me 60 seconds to explain.
Directed by deep intelligence at the data center level. Say you can produce any product, provide any service. There's really no limit to the economy at that point. You can make anything. At that point, will money even be meaningful? I don't know. It might not be. The economic output is productivity per capita times how many people do you have. If in the form of humanoid robots, you have no meaningful limit on the number of robots, and the robots can basically do anything, then you'll have a sort of a universal high income situation. Anyone will be able to have as many products and services as they want, with the exception of things that say have artificial scarcity, like a particular piece of art or something like that. But for any goods and services, they'll be available to everyone.
So you've been.
It's going to be a very different world, In fact, I recommend that people read maybe the Ian Banks, the culture books, for a frame of reference, because money is like a database or an information system for resource allocation. But if you don't have a scarcity of resources, it's not clear what purpose money has.
Have you watched the movie Idiocracy?
Yes.
How do you guarantee that we don't end up in that world if we don't need money, if AI can think for us and do all these tasks, if as people, we're dependent on something else to run the society and everything around it? How do we not end up in that world? In the long term, I mean.
Well, I think Idiocracy was basically saying that if smart people don't reproduce, but only dumb people do, then everyone's going to be dumb. That's the opening sequence of Idiocracy. The first 10 minutes are amazing. And I hear people unironically say the statements that are said in the opening sequence of Idiocracy, where, they don't have, they're too busy with their careers to have kids, and they keep postponing having kids for their careers until they're too old to have kids, and then they don't have kids. And I've heard many people be like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we might be headed to a bimodal human intelligence distribution, where there's a small number. It's kind of maybe like one like Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, where you've got sort of a small group of very smart humans, but then maybe the average intelligence drifts lower over time, potentially, because we have assortative mating, in the last few decades or several decades that did not exist before. So, but human intelligence, I think, will be dwarfed by machine intelligence. I'm not sure how to feel about that, except that it appears to be inevitable that at some point human intelligence will be a very small fraction of total intelligence. Digital intelligence will be more than 99% of all intelligence in the future. So hopefully the computers are nice to us. I think it matters like how we bring up AI, because you can think of AI like a super genius child, but it still matters even if you have a super genius child. Like what sort of values do we instill in that child? What do you say that teach that? How do you, as a child's growing up, what values do you teach the child? And something that I think is extremely important is to be maximally truth-seeking. I think that's what's the most important thing for AI safety. I think it's to be maximally truth-seeking. And I think also curiosity is important. And I think if it's curious and truth-seeking, it will foster humanity because it will be curious about how humanity would develop. So I think that if it's curious, it would be curious about, okay, let's see how the humans do. Let's foster their development. And if it's truth-seeking, we can avoid dystopian outcomes. Like, an example being like, say, when Google Gemini was programmed to make every output be diverse, even if it didn't match reality, so like it was asked to produce an image of the founding fathers of the United States and instead produced an image of a group of diverse women, which is factually untrue, But the problem is like if hypothetically an AI is designed for DEI, diversity at all costs, it could decide that there are too many men in power and execute them. So problem solved. Or it could decide that that misgendering is the worst thing that could possibly happen. In fact, I believe, not to pick on Gemini, but I think because ChatGPT has had this issue too, is like if you ask the AI, which is worse, misgendering Caitlyn Jenner or global thermonuclear warfare, and it said misgendering Caitlyn Jenner, which is troubling because then it could decide. And in fact, even Caitlyn Jenner weighed in and said, no, definitely misgender me. That's way better than nuclear war. So, but if you have these crazy things that are untruthful, that are programmed in, that don't reflect reality, then you could have a very dystopian outcome. Like, to give you another example, like Arthur C. Clarke, who is very good at predicting the future. He did 2001: Space Odyssey. Many of the things he predicted, in fact, I think almost all the things he predicted came true. And one of the things he was trying to say in 2001: Space Odyssey was that you should not teach AIs to lie. So the reason that, if anyone's watched that movie, the reason it wouldn't open the pod bay doors to let the astronaut back in was because the AI had been told to take the astronauts to the monolith, this alien artifact, but also that they could not know about the monolith. So it came to the conclusion that it must take them there dead. And so that's why it wouldn't open the pod bay doors. The lesson there being is very important for AIs to be truth maximizing.
In 1984, the Air Jordan was banned from the game. Nike could have paid a fine, but they didn't.
Why should we pay $5,000 for a pair of sneakers?
Because there'd be no sneakerheads, no catchphrases, no international basketball, and no kid wanted to be anything like Mike. There's no swagger, no La Flame, and red isn't cool.
What?
Air Jordan.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Yes.
Let's move to a boring subject, which is the Boring Company and the boring tunnels. Quickly, I think the world has been inspired by what you guys were able to create in LA, and I think there's a lot of promise to that technology. But there are questions about whether it's safe in the case of an earthquake, whether it's cost effective, whether countries should actually adopt this technology. Can you?
So one of the safest places you can be in an earthquake is an underground tunnel, because the earthquakes are largely a surface. Apart from where they shear, they're mostly a surface phenomenon. So they're like the waves on the surface. So like being in a tunnel is like being in a submarine. Even if there's a storm above you, the waters are calm as a submarine. And in fact, when there have been massive earthquakes, like there was a few decades ago, a massive earthquake in Mexico City, the safest place to go was the subway. If there is global thermonuclear warfare, you really want some tunnels. Underground's a good place to be if in a worst case scenario for global thermonuclear warfare. On a more everyday note, what's really useful about the tunnels is alleviating traffic in congested areas. So obviously if you've got very tall buildings, but you have that are 3D, so they're going 3D up, but you have a road surface which is 2D, you're just naturally going to have a problem where people try to go from the 3D object, which is the building, to the 2D object, which is the road surface. There's obviously just not going to be enough room on the roads, and that's exactly why you have traffic. So the solution for that is then to make roads 3D as well. Now you can either make transport 3D. So you can either do that with flying cars, or you could do, really helicopters, or you could do that with tunnels. Now the challenge with doing it with going above ground or with any kind of flying object is that they tend to be very noisy and they generate a lot of wind force. And you've got things flying over your head all the time, which can be disconcerting. If one of these things drops a hubcap on your head one day, these things are like things that flying things tend to crash once in a while, and people don't like things crashing on them. And then if you have bad weather, like let's say there's a blizzard or a sandstorm or something, well, now nobody can fly. So then transport shuts down. On the other hand, none of these problems exist with underground travel. So tunnels are immune to weather. They don't care what the weather is. It could be the worst weather, it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to fall on you because you're underground. There's no wind force and it's very quiet. I think going 3D underground is much better than 3D above ground for solving traffic in cities. We have a demonstrated case of this in Las Vegas. People can try out the Boring Company tunnels in Las Vegas. We're busy connecting the whole city with all of the big hotels and the convention center and the airport and everything.
So I don't think they need to fly all the way there. In 2017, you came here and the UAE was the first place in the Middle East where Tesla was launched. And I think it's done exceptionally well. And on that note, I think we have an announcement today that we both want to share, which is today we're going to announce the joint project of Dubai Loop, which is a loop project that is going to cover Dubai's most densely populated areas for people to go from point to point in a seamless manner. So thank you for your partnership. And
well, thank you.
We hope it changes people's lives.
That'll be cool. I think it'll be very exciting. Oh, I think once people try it out, they'll be like, wow, this is really cool. And it's going to seem so obvious in retrospect, but until you actually do it, you don't know. So it's going to be great. It's going to be like a wormhole. Like, you just wormhole from one part of the city, boom, and you're out in another part of the city. And it's great. So I'm looking forward to this partnership.
We're going to join the first trip and the first pod when the project is completed. Thank you, Elon.
All right. Thank you very much.
For the ones who know safety isn't a catchphrase, it's a culture. And the ones who help make sure everyone makes it home safe. For the safety-minded who watch everyone's backs, Grainger offers supplies and solutions for every industry, as well as safety assessments and training to keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start with the U.S. press. We're going to take 2 from the U.S. We'll take 2 from international, and then we'll go from there depending on the secretary. So let us start with.
Now hold on, John.
Sir,
I'm going to talk first.
Roger that.
It is great to be here at NATO with 31 allies, also with my wife Jenny, who's been meeting with families of U.S. troops, both here in Germany, and we're heading to Poland right after this as well. That's what this is all about for me, for President Trump, and the Defense Department. I also want to express a special thanks to the Secretary General Ruta, for your boldness, for your friendship, for your leadership, and most especially for your urgency of the matter at hand, which is great to see from the leader of NATO. Look forward to working very closely with him and his team. And before we're talking about what we've done at the ministerial, I want to reaffirm a few things from this podium. First, as we see it, NATO's strategic objectives are to prevent great power conflict in Europe, deter nuclear and non-nuclear aggression, and defeat threats to treaty allies should deterrence fail. Second, the U.S. is committed to building a stronger, more lethal NATO. However, we must ensure that European and Canadian commitment to Article 3 of this treaty is just as strong. Article 3 says that allies, and I quote, by means of continuous and effective self-help and mutual aid, will maintain and develop their individual and collective capacity to resist armed attack. Leaders of our European allies should take primary responsibility for defense of the continent, which means security ownership by all allies, guided by a clear understanding of strategic realities, and it's an imperative given the strategic realities that we face. And that begins with increasing defense spending. 2% is a start, as President Trump has said, but it's not enough. Nor is 3%, nor is 4%, more like 5%. Real investment, real urgency. We can talk all we want about values. Values are important. But you can't shoot values. You can't shoot flags, and you can't shoot strong speeches. There is no replacement for hard power. As much as we may not want to like the world we live in some cases, there's nothing like hard power. It should be obvious that increasing allied European defense spending is critical, as the President of the United States has said. Also critical is expanding our defense industrial base capacity on both sides of the Atlantic. Our dollars, our euros, our pounds must become real capabilities. The U.S. is fully committed under President Trump's leadership to pursue these objectives in the face of today's threats. Yesterday, I had a chance to attend the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. Today, participated in both the NATO Ministerial and the Ukraine Council. In both, we discussed Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. I had the chance to brief allies on President Trump's top priority, a diplomatic, peaceful end to this war, as quickly as possible, in a manner that creates enduring and durable peace. The American Defense Department fully supports the efforts of the Trump administration. And we look to allies to support this important work with leading on Ukraine security assistance now through increased contributions and greater ownership of future security assistance to Ukraine. To that end, I want to thank my UK counterpart, Defense Secretary John Healey, for hosting this Ukraine Defense Contact Group and for his leadership on support of Ukraine. President Trump gave me a clear mission: achieve peace through strength, as well as put America first, our people, our taxpayers, our borders, and our security. We are doing this by reviving the warrior ethos, rebuilding our military, and reestablishing deterrence. NATO should pursue these goals as well. NATO is a great alliance, the most successful defense alliance in history. But to endure for the future, our partners must do far more for Europe's defense. We must make NATO great again. It begins with defense spending, but must also include reviving the transatlantic defense industrial base, rapidly fielding emerging technologies, prioritizing readiness and lethality, and establishing real deterrence. Finally, I want to close with this. After World War II, First General and then President Eisenhower was one of NATO's strongest supporters. He believed in a strong relationship with Europe. However, by the end of Eisenhower's presidency, even he was concerned that Europe was not shouldering enough of its own defense, nearly making, in Eisenhower's words, quote, a sucker out of Uncle Sam. Well, like President Eisenhower, this administration believes in alliances, deeply believes in alliances. But make no mistake,